So it's my pleasure to introduce Derek McDougall, who is a physical geographer at the University of Worcester, and he's a specialist in glaciation, and he's going to take us on a kind of virtual tour of glaciers, and look forward to hearing more about what you've got to see, got to show, sorry.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Charlotte. I do like surprises, so that was great. Thank you very much for that. Taking inspiration from Nick's talk earlier this morning, a little bit of audience participation. A show of hands, who would describe themselves as a glacial geomorphologist or a glaciologist? So that's just me then, which I thought might be the case. So if you're wondering why I'm standing here in front of you here, it's two reasons. Firstly, it develops the virtual fieldwork theme, so hopefully there'll be some sort of relevance there. And secondly, the regional speaker dropped out, so effectively I've really just sort of stood in. So hopefully there'll be something here to interest you, even if it's just pictures of mountains. So there we go. So what is virtual glaciers and glaciated landscapes? Well, it's a newly developed free online resource, lots of virtual field trips to these locations. And fundamentally, it's about supporting the teaching of glaciers and glaciation in class and lab sessions. As one or two speakers emphasised yesterday, it is not, and I still feel the need to emphasise, it's not about replacing real field work. Aiming for an April 2018 launch, and there's some additional work. So this is really very much at the start. It's not the end product just yet. As to why I developed it in the first place, anecdotal evidence suggests that the topic of glaciers and glaciation is often quite difficult to introduce and engage with in the classroom. And I think the reason for that is fairly straightforward. Glacial environments are unfamiliar to most people, unlike the case with perhaps rivers, coasts, and similar. Solution, of course, is some well-designed field work, and that's always great. And field work's excellent. It's excellent to encourage it. Well, it's very good for simulating enjoyment and understanding. The problem with fieldwork, and again we heard this yesterday, is that the fieldwork rarely takes place at the same time as you're actually learning about it in a class setting. So there's a time issue, there's usually a bit of a gap. Secondly, with regards to this specific topic, fieldwork often takes place in deglaciated environments such as the Lake District, Snowdonia and the likes. And for very good reasons. Logistically, it's easier, it's certainly cheaper. But the bottom line is it's actually much more challenging to interpret because you can go to these locations, you can see some of the outcomes, you still don't see what glaciers look like, and it's also easy to actually misinterpret and oversimplify the interpretation once you're in these sort of locations. And as with any field work, it can be affected by poor weather, accessibility issues and the likes. And sometimes field work doesn't take place at all, and there may be budgetary reasons, maybe illness, whatever. So this resource is, and this is the second time I've mentioned, is really not intended to replace real field work. It's about rather replacing lectures like this perhaps, and providing opportunities for more interaction. So that's really what this is about. And the emphasis of the resource itself, as well as this talk, is more on the ease of use and how it might be used in the classroom. It's less about the technology itself. So talking about that, how does it work? It's actually fairly straightforward and actually simpler than some of the other virtual fieldworks that we've heard about so far. It's based around high-quality 360 degrees panoramas, or panospheres is the technical term. Just enables you to look all around, zoom in on features of interest. If I want to kind of simplify it, it's a bit like Google Street View, but I would suggest that the quality of the imagery is better. On the other hand, you don't have quite the same coverage. And you can proceed through the landscape from one location to the next. Here's a screenshot. I wanted to get some of the nice videos that we saw yesterday, but I think you're going to do this. You really want a higher frame rate than the 30 frames per second I had in the software on my computer. So please forgive me. Just static images. So what you see in the left-hand side, the main pane, is the view. You can look around 360 degrees. You can look straight up, straight down, zoom in features of interest. The yellow dot there, you can see is the next stop. So you can click on that and move. On the right-hand side, that pane there shows Google imagery, satellite imagery. You can change that to a map. And it also shows where you're located and also your field of view as well. That's important because it helps you relate what you can see on the ground to what it looks like from above. And that's one of the biggest challenges I certainly find with students. So if we're to click on the yellow dot, that would take us to the next stop. So it's all fairly simple, fairly straightforward. One thing I want to emphasize is that this resource does not provide the interpretation alongside it. And the reason for that is that once you begin to provide the interpretation alongside the resources themselves, you immediately set the academic level and set the topics already. There will be interpretation provided separately, but these resources, the core resources themselves, are intended to be sort of standalone, interpretation-free, so they can be used at school, in schools, colleges, universities, at a range of levels, depending on what the teacher or lecturer actually wants to get out of it. So for me, that's very important. There are two groups of virtual field trips so far, still early days. The first is in present-day glacial environments. So we've got 3 from Switzerland. You can see here, there we go, there's Geneva, Lake Geneva there, and we've got a few located there. There's the Furpec Valley, the Arolla Valley, and the Moari Valley. So, and they all offer kind of different things. The Moari Valley virtual field trip, for example, and there's a screenshot here, provides opportunities to explore different topics. For those not familiar with glacial environments, that's the glacier itself, debris covered, and of course that debris cover influences rates of melt and surface processes. So that's one broad group of things to consider. You can consider glacier retreat and landscape change. For example, note up there, very giant, the large little ice age, Larchland moraine there. You can look at landforms of glacial erosion as well, and also those associated with weathering and mass wasting in mountain environments. And of course, last but not least, the impact of people in the landscape itself. A bit further down valley from this location, there's a large dam. It's part of the Grand Essence hydroelectric power scheme, and you can look at the impact of that and flow rates. So that's an example from present-day glacial environments. There's another group currently in the Lake District focused on Helvellyn Range, in particular. That's the main one, but also developed ones in Mosdale, which is the head of Wasdale Head in the Lake District, and also a small site, Keskadale, in Newlands Valley. So the Helvellyn Range, lots of things to look at as well. Again, landforms and landscapes of glacial erosion. You can also look at moraines, specifically relating to the Younger Dryas glaciation. You can look at the impact of paraglacial reworking. That's the sort of thing that makes it more challenging to interpret as a landform record. These moraines, effectively, unconsolidated sediments and steep valley sides, following deglaciation, they're rapidly reworked, they become altered, they become much more difficult to interpret, and that's what we train our students to do, to actually try and unpick that impact. Also opportunities to look at cold climate non-glacial processes, periglacial landforms, block fields, for example, and also mass wasting features. In this part of the world, there are some quite impressive rock slope failures within the Borrowdale volcanic group. And generally, because I'm here, I thought I should add geology and landscape development generally. So lots of things to see. So that's what we've got so far. Still at the early stages. This is very much a kind of hobby, in my spare time type project. But over time, over the next 12 to 24 months, I'm looking to add additional virtual field trips. Also adding some environmental audio just to make it feel as though you're actually there. where it adds value. So for contemporary glacial environments where you've got the sound of meltwater, that's great. In the Lake District, it doesn't add quite so much. It's just normally wind and rain. Video, again, where it adds value. I'm interested in 3D video as well, but not for the sake of it. So again, when you've got things actually happening, it's worth capturing. And also wanting to add 3D models and really browser-based 3D models over time. Not done that yet, but the work of Chris Barrows at the University of Exeter, he's used Sketchfab and created a number of, he's used structure for motion, which we heard about yesterday, and he's uploaded a number of models. What you can see in the top right-hand side of the screen is what he interprets as thermal karst in Dartmoor. And that model, and again, it would be nice if I had a video, but that can be rotated and examined seamlessly and very smoothly within the browser. No specialist software required. So I'd like to do a little bit more of that. And there'll also be a forum where an opportunity for teachers, lecturers, etc., to share interpretations and handouts and worksheets and the likes. It's very important for people to actually use it, for this to be easy to use. So all you really need is an internet connection and a browser, and that's it. There's no plugins, no specialist software, and that's what's driving it. And the thinking here is that increasingly in schools and organizations, IT systems are increasingly just tied down for security reasons. So it's meant to be easy to use. How can it be used in the classroom? I've got 6 broad examples, which I'll run through fairly quickly for you. Firstly, it's about landform and landscape interpretation in the field. So you can actually try and apply what you've just been learning about in class. It's all very well to be presented with textbook examples of features. The reality is much messier, it's much more complicated. So what we can see here, a nice little ice age lateral moraine, which has been partially reworked. You tend not to see these within textbooks at all. The textbook examples you rarely see in reality. Field sketching, you don't necessarily need virtual fieldwork for that. I suppose you could just provide some pictures for practice before going into the field, but that's still one way you can use it. I do this quite a bit, this one, the third one, field checking of geomorphological maps. We get students using GIS software. They use Google Earth, but they also use ArcMap. They bring in satellite imagery, they bring in LiDAR data from the Environment Agency and other data sources as well, and they produce maps of moraines and slope failures and debris flow, the whole range of things that they do. And that's looking straight down from above. The field checking phase is important. We do get them into the field. However, just to help them as they're learning how to interpret the imagery, we provide them with virtual fieldwork, which allows them to ground check up to a point. So as long as they've got a panosphere at that particular location. Also, again at Worcester, we get students using virtual fieldwork to produce a field guide. The Quaternary Research Association, they've got a whole range of field guides, and it's about taking people into landscape, taking them to different sites and interpreting those sites for them. A great way to find out whether a student's actually understood a topic and whether they can make sense of the landscape is getting them to decide where to go and what to feature within a field guide itself. So they're effectively teaching you about what they can see. Yes, you could just provide a whole series of static images, but then you're presenting the views for them already. The virtual fieldwork provides them with at least some element of control there. Fifthly, we use virtual fieldwork to prepare students for being into the field, so it means that the time is used more effectively. There's less of the kind of surprise, the novelty value. The image behind is from the Rosegg Valley in southeastern Switzerland. It's one of the older field trips, 2010. It's still going just about. Web technologies have changed. But this is, we don't take our students there, but we take them to another setting in the Swiss Alps. So it's a kind of compare, contrast. They're seeing similar sorts of features. And finally, you can use virtual fieldwork as perhaps a follow-up to real fieldwork, or perhaps if fieldwork does not take place for some reason. And again, I would not use this as justification for not doing real fieldwork, but there will occasionally be reasons when students struggle perhaps for personal reasons. In terms of accessing the resources, well, you can't yet, but there will be a free-to-use, well, there will be a website launching in April 2018. All the, once I've learned WordPress, etc., and you'll be able to access all the resources there, and there's going to be ongoing development thereafter. Very much a work in progress. I'm at the early stages here. That's why it was my original intention just to do a poster, and there is a poster out there. A lot of work still to do. For me, it's about dissemination impact. If people aren't using it, what's the point? So I'm keen to try and get the word out and liaise with teachers and colleagues in other universities as well. And again, as mentioned yesterday by John, it's not especially expensive. I've spent all the money, well, I've spent money on equipment and software, and that's fine. And the next thing really is travel time. Staff time is not covered here at all, other than the fact that I continue to be paid for the time being by my university, so which is great. I'd like to round off by acknowledging the sources, well, the funders, the University of Worcester in particular, also Quaternary Research Association, and finally the British Society for Geomorphology. It's about a teaching resource, it's about outreach as well, so it's multiple, at least two boxes being ticked there. And that's it. I'd like to finish there. Thank you very much.